to never steer me wrong. So lead on, good shepherd, lead
For his namesake podcast, where we talk about leadership skills for this generation that they can use not only in their church, school, and community, but most importantly, their entire Christian walk. And so today with us, we have Dr. Brian Williams. I'm so glad you could join us today. And just so everybody can know a little bit about you, just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks, Casey, for the opportunity to do this. Thanks for what you're doing. I think this is such a needed thing in our culture today. So I really appreciate that you've kind of taken this bull by the horns in doing this. My name is Brian Williams. I grew up in West Virginia, spent all of my life until graduated from high school there, and went from there to Southeastern College in 91, which that's a long, long time ago, 35 years, I guess now, since I left. Graduated from there, went on to was a youth pastor in Kentucky for a couple of years, went back to pastor in Lincolnton, North Carolina, at the Highland Drive Church there. Spent 11 years there, worked on my MDiv, finished that while I was there. And then in 2010, we made the shift, my family and I, to become church planters. And ever since then, we've been in the Buffalo, New York area, serving at the NorthPoint Church, and was able to complete, as Casey said, my doctorate last year, and still just continuing to serve here. In fact, part of my task now is building a cohort of church planters in the Buffalo area from all different movements and denominations. We have our first meeting next week, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me, sitting here in my office watching the snowfall here in Buffalo, and just another day.
That's awesome. And over your time in the pastoral position, what are some leadership opportunities you've got over your life?
Sure. So I've had numerous opportunities, I guess. Of course, primarily serving as a youth pastor, and then as a pastor. I've served on local levels and denominational kind of stuff. Had the opportunity to teach on a couple of different occasions. Taught for Gateway Christian College for a year. Taught at Southeastern as an adjunct for a year, for a semester there. So those have been some of the opportunities. And then, of course, working here and while I was in North Carolina, I've done some police chaplaincy, established some chaplaincy ministries and opportunities that have come out of that. My greatest role, I guess, of leadership is in my home with my wife Emily and our three children, Leah, Lauren, and Lucas. Leah is 26. She's now serving on a church planting team in San Diego, California. Super excited for the ministry there. Lauren is 22. She is currently raising support to move to France as a 2-year intern missionary. And Lucas is 16. He's preaching now, is the worship pastor at our church, doing an incredible job. And so that's my greatest leadership opportunities come in just being able to lead my family.
That's awesome. And over all that time and the opportunities you've got, who are some people that you've looked up to over the years?
I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was actually praying, and I began to think back through. As a teenager, there were some older pastors, bivocational retired guys that just poured into me and let me have some opportunities to come in as a 15-year-old kid and preach on Sunday nights and that kind of thing. And those things left some lasting impressions on me. And one particular gentleman, his name was Jim Stanley. He's since gone on to be with the Lord. But he became the pastor of our church when I was, I guess, a junior in high school. And man, he really treated me like an associate pastor. And he would have me in his home every week, and we would talk through the service, and he's showing me his message. And he was, for an older gentleman, he was well ahead of his time. He used the old overhead projectors like it was his Bible. He loved that thing, and so he would make the copies and write on it and do all this stuff. So he had a really big influence on my life. And then once I got to college, the list is so long of guys that poured into me. My dad is not a believer, and so as a young college student, I really kind of learned to grow from some men that just kind of took me under their wings. Probably two in particular would be Randy Sawyer and Danny Dwyer, both of which have been mentors my entire life, and I love those guys, and so appreciate what they've done and the impact that they've had on my life. And then, of course, being in our denomination, just being able to see so many pastors, I say older pastors, and I'm looking at the gray while I'm saying it. I'm probably fitting more into that role now than I used to, but that have just kind of, they've given me opportunities and poured into me, and I've been blessed by some incredible men in my life that have allowed me to have some opportunities and have just really kind of, they've spoken the hard things to me. They've been the encouragement to me. They've given me opportunities when I really didn't deserve them, but they've had a huge impact on me.
Well, that's awesome. And, seeing those people and from the opportunities you've had over the years, and it's a hard thing. And some people give the basic answer, but I'm interested to see what you'll say. Um, if you could define leadership in one word, what would it be?
You know, I'll give you two words.
There you go.
So two different definitions, but I think when you merge the two together, it kind of helps define my idea of leadership. One is servanthood,
Mhm.
because I think our greatest example of a leader was in Jesus, and we see him serving in so many ways, not lording it over, not with an iron fist kind of thing. He knew how to do that if he had to do it, but was just a servant. And when I think about a leader, I think about that. And the other term I think of is integrity,
Mhm.
because when you have those opportunities of leadership and the opportunity to kind of pour into others or lead them, your life is a huge part of that. And if you're one thing, on the stage and another thing in private, or you portray yourself in one way among people and it's another way with your family, your leadership opportunities are going to be, they're going to be very limited. And I don't know how effective a leader you can be.
Mhm.
So those two terms come to mind: is servant and integrity. I think probably fit my role of what a real leader is.
That's awesome. And so in your chapter, I kind of called on you last minute in this project, and you definitely were, yeah, you were a lifesaver. and I always picked on because I'm from Cramerton Church, and my pastor, he was definitely not the last one to turn his in, but it only took you 2 weeks to write yours, so I definitely don't make fun of him for that.
Yeah, that's right. Not even a little bit.
No, but Dr. Brian Williams' chapter is on patience, and I think for me that's probably definitely one of my big character flaws, and so it is for a lot of people. And I thought it hilarious. Like in the first few pages of your chapter, you talked about things that people that struggle with patience, especially people in the car on the road, and there's always somebody in front of you that is going very slow, or me as a tall person, there's always a shorter person in front of me that just has to walk very slow. I'm like, please get out of the way.
Understand all of that. That certainly resonates.
Yes, and so with patience, you mentioned in your chapter a bunch of Bible verses, but I'm just to highlight one, which is Hebrews 12:1, which says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that's set before us."
Mhm.
And so, this kind of is a right after the Hall of Faith chapter, and all those people in the Bible that were mentioned that ran their race, but they did it with patience, even though everything in their life, there was a lot that happened, but they were patient throughout it, and they always sought the Lord and trusted in the Lord through those times. And so, why, Dr. Brian Williams, is it so important for us to have patience in our leadership?
Well, I think for that particular chapter, one of the things that I think we miss a lot of times is that that's really kind of a recurring theme all the way back to chapter 10 of
Mm.
Hebrews. Um, and I think I want to say it's like verse 28 or something when he first kind of throws out this idea. And then it's like he throws it out 4, 5, 6 different times. Some translations have endurance, which I think kind of encapsulates the real idea of it. Um, but I think, I think as you think through him giving us that challenge in chapter 10, and then he gives us all of these examples in chapter 11, and
Mhm.
then uses all that as a springboard to then say to us, okay, this is what you need.
Mhm.
And when you go back through, as you mentioned, that hall of faith, and you start to look at those guys, every time I read that chapter, I just kind of shake my head in amazement.
Mhm.
Because just when I think, okay, maybe I've got this patience thing figured out a little bit, and I know I don't, but when I think that maybe I do, I go back and read, and I think, man, I don't know that I could do that. Like I like to think that I could, but the patience that a guy like Abraham exhibited
Mhm.
in waiting all those years, and yet remain true to his faith and to his God and to his calling in his life. Like that's a huge. I think that's a huge example for us to follow. Or I think about guys like Jeremiah. That while not specifically mentioned in chapter 11, to go into the ministry as he did, and all these years of doing ministry, and um, years of waiting with no results and nothing that he could see on a tangible level.
Mhm.
And man, I read those guys and I think that what could we do if we were that patient or had that kind of endurance in ministry? Because I think statistically, you read all kinds of stuff, but I think the average youth pastor stays in his place like 2 years for a youth ministry. And I think a lot of that is because we get in the midst of those trying times and we don't know how to overcome that.
Mhm.
We don't know what to do. And so the easy way out is we're going to check out and move on somewhere else. And unfortunately, we see that in a lot of pastors, that their tenures of where they stay is, it may be 1 year or 5 years, but behind it is an asterisk that says until things got tough.
Mhm.
And when things get tough, we have this tendency that, all right, we're ready to go. We move on to the next opportunity, and we find what that is. I think all those examples just remind us that whether we're talking about our faith, whether we're talking about our personal lives and the journeys that we're on, whether we're talking about the ministries that we've been called to, we've got to have some endurance in this. And too many guys throw in the towel. Too many guys walk away from it. Too many guys give up. When things get tough. And that's certainly not the biblical model or the admonition that we have in Hebrews 12.
Mhm. And and throughout your chapter, you know, as I said in the beginning, we all, I think, struggle with patience in some aspect. We get impatient with people in some area or form. And in your chapter, you said patience or long suffering is something that we all desire from others, but often struggle ourselves demonstrating. And why do you think that's so? That we see it in others, but why is it so hard for ourselves to demonstrate that?
Well, Jesus talked about that, right?
Mm.
Of we see the little speck in the other guy's eye, while we've got this huge log, this beam that is in our eye.
Mhm.
That's an interesting question. I don't know why we do that, um, but we do.
Mhm.
It's so much easier to find fault in others. I think sometimes, and I don't think this is across the board, but I think sometimes it makes us feel better
Mhm.
when we can find flaws in someone else, that somehow makes us feel a little better about ourselves than maybe what we should. But I do think it's easy to put up blinders. We look at others and say, "Oh, that would never be me." I'm preaching from Romans 2 this week. We just kicked off a series in the book of Romans, and of course, you know how Romans 1 is. It's all this stuff,
Mhm.
from envy and idolatry to homosexuality to sexual perversion, like the whole long list. And
Mhm.
chapter 2 begins, and it's almost like the Jews are going, "Whew, I'm glad none of that could be said about me." And Paul
Yeah.
just stops them dead in their tracks to say, "Who do you think you are?" Like, because you don't, you may not wear it with the same level of pride that they do,
Right.
or it may not be as prevalent, that others see that. The reality is, we build those monuments in our own hearts if we're not careful, and we miss seeing the things in our lives that may hinder us or keep us from being able to carry out the ministry that we're called to do.
Right. And you know, I think so oftentimes we get we get caught up in wanting to do this and wanting to do that, but as it says in Psalms 46:10, to be still and know that He is God. And I feel like so often we get kind of caught up in this circle and that we keep doing the things we've always been doing, and we kind of sometimes lose sight of the purpose because we never really slow down and remember
Mm,
what our purpose is
yeah.
and what is our mission here. And in your chapter, kind of towards the end, you talked about enduring will lead to, what is our end goal. And in this, you talked about being ambassadors for Christ.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people, we all want to be ambassadors, of course. But sometimes when we go out, we witness to people, we talk to people about Jesus, and maybe there's somebody in our church or our youth groups that we're trying to witness to, but they just don't seem to be getting it. Like they have that hard heart, like Farah
mm.
did, and they're not seeming to get it. And how do we be patient in those circumstances where we're trying to witness to someone, but they just don't seem to be receptive of it?
Yeah, yeah. I'll go back to Hebrews 12, for just a minute, when he's giving us that image of running a race. I'm not a runner. I've never pretended to be a runner. I hate running. I always tell our people, if you see me running, something's after me. Like I despise it. It's not for me. But the imagery is not lost on me that Paul is giving us a picture of, one, we're keeping our eyes on the prize, on the finish line, and the right now. What that looks like right now may look entirely different, than what it does sometime down the road, which would encourage us. Okay, keep running, because the prize is there, and we can't get discouraged over things that are beyond our control. We can't, in the middle of it, give up and just say, "Well, I've already prayed, and so I'm not doing that anymore," kind of thing. So, I think that analogy that he uses, and Paul is a sports guy, like he would have been all over ESPN if it would have been around in his day.
Hmm.
He was clearly that guy, but it teaches us some great lessons about, don't lose sight of the goal that's before you. We continue to pray, we continue to minister, we continue to serve, we continue to witness. We do all those things, knowing that we're involved in this race. And there is a finish line, and one day we're going to get there. And one day, prayerfully, that individual that you've been sharing Christ with, that you've been praying for, that you've been ministering to, it just may happen at a time that you would never expect it, even in a way that you would never expect it. But we keep our eyes on that prize. And I think the other thing interesting about that text is, Paul just or excuse me, the author of Hebrews, who I think was Luke, but I'm caught up in Romans here in my head. But he would teach us that we're keeping our eyes on Jesus, that our real focus is not just on those guys in Hebrews chapter 11. They're great examples for us, but our real focus is on Christ. And if I can keep my eyes on Him and look to Him, and I love, he uses that point that we're not even to the point of shedding blood. And I always say, when I'm preaching or teaching that text, I
Hmm.
used to say to my kids, they come in and they're crying because they're hurt or, whatever. And it's like, "You're not even bleeding. Get back out in the yards, stop it." And I read that text, and that's kind of how I think. Like, we think, "Man, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad." And Hebrews says, would you look at Jesus and just keep your eyes on Him?
Hmm.
Because He stayed focused, and He completed the ministry that He was called to do, even to the point of going to the cross. And you're not even bleeding yet, right?
Right.
Like, stop it and get back out there. And so when we want to get discouraged and we quit, or we want to get discouraged and walk away from ministry, or we tend to kind of get overwhelmed because the timetable's not working out the way that we think that it should. At the end of the day, we look to the life of ministry, and I think I even alluded to this in the chapter, that Jesus was patient enough to wait 30 years for His ministry to
Hmm.
begin. He obviously could have started much sooner, But I think there's even in that, there's a lesson on waiting for the right time, waiting for those right opportunities, and God's going to open that door. And then once He did, Jesus went through that door distinctly. He went through that door very plainly and asserted Himself to do exactly what He needed to do for the sake of the gospel.
Right. And in your chapter, this kind of just backs up what you just said, that enduring hardship may not be a sign of failure, but it could be an affirmation of one's calling. And
Mhm.
what you said about keeping your eyes on Jesus, it reminds me of Peter when he stepped out on water, and that he was looking at Jesus, and then as soon as he turned away from Jesus, he started to sink. And I feel like so often the times that we lose sight of who Jesus is, and maybe not only that, but we just keep the focus off of Him, that we get distracted by all these things around us, that
Yeah,
we start to sink, and we start to worry. We start to like, what's going on?
yeah,
Why are these things happening to me? But if we would just look at Jesus the whole time, He'll get us through those hard times, even though
yeah,
they'll still come.
absolutely.
And
And just a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was, and I forget what anniversary it was, but it was the anniversary of the death of Jim Elliott and Nate Saint and those guys that went to the Auca Indians. And
mm,
on paper, that ministry looks like a failure,
yeah,
right? Like they went in, it didn't go the way they expected. They lost their lives. Their families lost their dads and their husbands, and but now to hear all these years later of that tribe that came to Christ, and the missionaries and the ministers and pastors that came out of that. It was just that when I heard that story and read an article about it just a couple of weeks ago, I thought, man, what a great example of what we look at and go, well, that's a failure. That didn't turn out the way I expected it to. That God may be writing a story behind the scenes that we never know what He's going to do in using us when we're patient and we endure to the very end.
right. That's awesome. And you also said about endurance that it's needed to protect my reputation. And you said that one of the greatest obstacles to the progress of the gospel today is the bad example of people who profess to be
Mhm.
Christian. And I think that kind of goes with one of your uh, character traits for being a leader, about having integrity.
Mhm.
And how does integrity play a role in being patient or waiting?
Well, I think unfortunately, we turn the news on every day,
Hmm.
and we probably hear some kind of a story of somebody that's in ministry somewhere that stole money from the church, that had an affair that had been going on. We just heard this last week, an 8-year long affair, from somebody who's written numerous books and spoken at conferences. In Buffalo, it's a very heavily Catholic area, and so there's sex abuse scandals, and there's very few days that there's not something that pops up on my news feed, about somebody who did something that hurt the name of Christ at the end of the day. And it's very unfortunate. I alluded a moment ago to Philip Yancey and his admitted affair that went on for 8 years. And here's my initial response, because I've got books on my shelf that he wrote, and I've read the books, and my initial response was, okay, I guess I have to throw those books away, right? Like, what good are those books? Now, the truth of the books still remains the truth of the books,
Hmm.
but it's unfortunate, that you have an individual who had such potential and opportunities that at the end of the day ruin those opportunities, right? And so I think, for long term kind of stuff, I could mention so many names, and that's not really the purpose here. But there's so many names that automatically come to mind of, man, they ran and they ran and they ran and they ran well, and then they blew it.
Hmm.
And they lose all credibility. They lose all impact. Ravi Zacharias comes to mind, just 2 or 3 years ago, one of the greatest minds when it comes to apologetics and defending the faith. But that's not what we remember him by. Now we remember him by scandal, right? And so, I think all that plays into if we're going to be the kind of leaders that God has called us to be, we've got to genuinely be who we are and live that out in every facet of our lives.
Right.
We can't hide that from others. We can't pretend to be something that we're really not, and that it really begins in the heart. And I think that affects every aspect of leadership, because even if it doesn't now, when those things are revealed, and when it comes out that, oh, see, I told you he wasn't who he said that he was. I told you needed to look out for him. I told you this whole gospel thing was just a hoax. Like, all the stuff that you hear as a result of that just goes back to remind us of how important it is, if we're to be leaders for the kingdom of God, that we live lives of integrity, so that there is no discovery made about me or made about you at some point in my life, or even after my life is over, that would totally negate any opportunities of leadership that I had.
Hmm.
So I think we've got to, it really is a heart thing, and it is a regular check of, God, show me any hidden sin, anything that's there. David would pray that in the Psalms, oftentimes, of reveal this to me, show me this, anything that's hidden in my heart, like, make that known to me. And I think that ought to be a regular prayer of ours of, God, show this to me. And then I think we need some guys in our lives. And I have those individuals that I have given the complete green light to ask me anything you want to ask me. I'll show you, I'll answer the questions, I'll be as honest as I can. And I think we need that in our lives, of some guys that'll hold us accountable, that'll call us on the carpet, so to speak, and that have free access to be able to call out those shortcomings in our lives. Because if not, again, sad to say, and everybody that's listening to this is thinking of some name of an individual that's done harm to the body of Christ because they weren't a leader with integrity, and that's very unfortunate in every aspect.
Yes, and it's important to have somebody that can come alongside of you that you can stay accountable with, because I feel
Mhm.
like that might be the downfall of a lot of people, that there might be something you're struggling with inside that you just need to talk to somebody about.
No,
Like you don't
absolutely.
like you don't know how to get over this hurdle, and I think that's such a key part. And kind of in conclusion, and I think this was the point for me that I was like, I think this is the right guy to write this chapter to help me out. And because really the whole reason I picked you for this is that Southeastern Spring Conference and the message you had, and I was like, this is awesome. Like this fits perfect. And in your conclusion, in the sermon and in the book, you put the part of the fellowship of the unashamed, and I had never heard that before until you had said it that time, and I was like, wow, that was like that. Wow, you know, like
Yeah.
I had never heard that before, and so I know you know more about it than I do, but like, what was kind of the backstory, where you heard it from, and why is this so impactful for people?
Yeah, I've tried to remember exactly where I heard it the first time. I'm pretty certain that I was actually at Southeastern as a student when I heard it for the first time. And I think it dates back, I want to say it was 1988, in Rwanda, and Christians were being attacked and murdered, for their faith. And that's really kind of where it stemmed from one of those missionaries that was there just doing his best to strive for the gospel. I knew that his life was probably going to be taken, and it would have been a very easy out to go, you know what, it's not what I signed up for. It's not what I need. I don't know that I'm ready for this. But instead just showed this amazing act of bravery in penning those words to that, what I guess a poem, maybe,
Yeah.
just a diary entry, whatever the case that it is. But I remember hearing that as a student, and it just really spoke to me personally,
Mm.
in multiple ways. One of which was, I'm asking myself, okay, would I be that guy? Like, could I be the guy that, knowing that my death is imminent, that I can make that bold of a declaration? I pray that I could, and God knows my heart. I want to be, and it always just kind of challenged me in that way. But it also reminded me, and I visited this numerous times over the years and use it in sermons and articles and things and it just became a personal thing for me that in the midst of those times of, okay, I don't know that I can keep on going with this.
Mm.
Right. Like we're church planters. And if I told our whole story, it's an up and down journey as any church plant is. And there are those moments that it's like, okay, I'm not sure if this thing's gonna make it, right?
Mm.
Like I'm not sure that this is gonna happen. And it was one of those things that I could just go back to personally to kind of drive that stake in the ground and say, no, this is who I am. This is what I've been called to do. This is a ministry that God has given me. He's not failed me up to this point. He's not going to fail me after this point. And God, give me the courage, like that missionary, just to say, man, regardless of what comes my way, I've staked this claim, and here's where I stand, and I'm a part of this fellowship, and I love it because I think it goes much broader than even what we recognize. Again, back to the Hebrews 11. One of my favorite parts about Hebrews 11 is it gets to the end and it talks about the fact that they did all this by faith, not even having received the promise. Like they did all this without anything being like, oh, great, the work is finished. And it's like, no, all they did was hand the baton off to the next guy and then wait, who handed the baton off to the next guy and is then waiting, and all the way down to chapter 12 when the baton has been handed to us and we're just running and they're waiting. But one day we all join together as this fellowship of men and women of Jesus Christ that staked our claim, stood firm, refused to back down, refused to give up, stayed strong in the face of adversity. And at the end of the day, man, I get to run alongside of those guys. And man, what a joy and what a privilege. So that little journal entry has just meant a lot to me personally, and I keep it in my files and revisit it quite often.
That's awesome. And I'll just read the end of it and we'll be done here. And it says, I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I must go until he returns, give until I drop, preach until all know, work until he comes. And when he comes to get his own, he will have no problem recognizing me, that my banner, it will be clear. And I pray that for all of us listening and for the people that want to be leaders and the people that are leaders, I pray that we can confidently say that. And that no matter what happens in our journey, no matter what happens in our race, that we'll be patient, that we'll have integrity through it. But at the end of our journey, and when we come face to face with Christ, our banner will be clear because we will have confidently known we could have done all we could for the man that saved us.
Amen.
But
Amen.
Yes, sir. And I just want to thank you for coming on today, Dr. Williams. And I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed your chapter. I think it's probably one of my favorite chapters in the book. And that little last part was just awesome putting that in there. But just thank you for everybody for joining us today. And I hope to see y'all in 2 weeks. We're going to start doing our episodes every other week now. And join us for Scott Coghill as he talks about his chapter on integrity. So thank y'all for joining us, and I will see y'all next week.
Good shepherd, I'll follow all my days.